What if no man had been to the moon for more than 50 years? It begs the question, if we have already done it once, why is it so painful to get back to the moon? When Boeing and Pratt & Whitney both have the needed experience to pursue these flights, NASA gathered the necessary experience after 8 lunar missions that turned out successful, so the USA could never have thought of returning to the moon. And we know why. 12 days later it returned. This was the last manned Apollo mission that launched on December 7, 1972. Taurus Littrow Valley was studied by Apollo 17 with a lunar rover, as had all other Apollo missions, and other scientific tests were carried out during the mission. It was 51 years ago, and for all this time it was almost like the moon had been cast aside as a little bit of space travel's stepchild. It's right on our doorstep, yet on that celestial object is and remains the one that's easiest to reach, and we humans ought to be getting more practice at manned space travel. Surely our species someday would like to sail into space to explore our own solar system, maybe even elsewhere. Why is NASA reluctant to return to the moon? There are good reasons. It was too expensive to fly to the moon. Today, it's hard to picture, but in the 80s, the US space programs were fought, fiercely protested against. The African American population and others had protested more and more after Apollo 16, ever more strongly against the fact that, in the effort to reach the moon, the state was spending such immense sums of money, while its poorest people did not receive enough food or social security. These growing concerns were not lost on the President Nixon, who realized that support from various populations was needed, and for that purpose decided to end the Apollo program and reroute these funds towards more pressing projects. The cost of the Apollo program was and remains enormous. Putting Apollo into perspective, we're talking an estimated $25.4 billion spent over the whole course of the program, which would easily swell to far more than that today, unless inflation is factored out. Fueled by this expenditure, the moody anger of some citizens, the moon was somehow becoming boring. In 1969, almost all Americans were watching when Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin landed on the moon, and by 1980, a whole lot fewer were. The entire American space policy turned on the decision by Nixon to finally end the Apollo program. Probes got more attention, but the Pioneer probes had been launched in the 1970s, and the 2 Voyager probes had been giving exciting highlights and unique images of space almost every year since 1979. As a result, you no longer had to fly to the moon, not even to perform research, nor for the sake of prestige. Is the moon still too expensive? Space travel had, however, long since enjoyed a renaissance in the meantime. Into space, we've explored almost the entire solar system with probes, built the ISS space station, and yes, there are also plans to return people to the moon as new technologies and new economic realities emerge. The USA and other nations would like to slowly colonize space. While this report focuses on Mars, the moon is making a comeback. This has also brought NASA back to the moon, with SpaceX being a source of ambitions for Elon Musk, and SpaceX have turned space travel on its head economically. Low cost. Components, reusable rocket stages and new fuels are the company's attempts to push the exploration and colonization of the universe forward, and so they are on the front of the line here. Not since the Apollo mission consumed billions of dollars in the 1960s and 70s is space travel as it is now. It is only now and today that NASA's budget is substantial. In 2021, spending was approximately $22.6 billion, but more is being spent more efficiently. Cost structures have changed entirely, thanks to inflation and technological advances, some of which have become more expensive, such as advanced computer-based technologies and specialty materials. Other innovations have reduced costs. New fuels and new launch vehicles that operate much more efficiently are examples. SpaceX is already helping NASA save billions. Just before the end of NASA's Space Shuttle program, SpaceX had already launched Dragon space shuttles, and that spared NASA the development costs for its own new shuttle program. So NASA astronauts have to ride to the ISS with SpaceX, and SpaceX is also the sole supplier to the ISS. Alas, these developments have also contributed to NASA's plans to get back to the moon, which had been halted on Earth. The project is easily manageable together, and we've also seen interest in lunar exploration grow again, not only out of practical reasons, with the scientific possibilities and even the prospect of using the Moon as a springboard for future missions to Mars, but also because of exquisite engineering challenges. Artemis includes the first Orion lunar module launched in 2022, with the first humans slated to return to the Moon by 2024. Now that's something NASA and SpaceX are already looking eagerly forward to, and the first moon landings and explorations will be a joint project. A disaster for our climate, as you can probably already imagine. Rockets and space travel don't always have a positive effect on our ecological footprint. One of those things that must arrive in space travel, and space travel has arrived with: environmental impact and sustainability. Our planet's climate is changing very quickly, and yet we can't store rockets in space without at least knowing when balancing benefit and damage. While space travel, and more generally climate change and environmental protection, have brought a more critical view to space travel, protests against current lunar missions, such as NASA's Artemis program, are less prominent than in previous decades. Or maybe because they want to worry about these things. Carbon emissions into the atmosphere from a conventional rocket are high enough to contribute to global warming, but those from space travel represent a small bit of the greenhouse gases in the air compared with other sources. For the past decade, SpaceX has launched at least a dozen rockets a year by itself. In fact, the ambitious Starlink program has been ratcheting this up more than 30 a year since 2021. As far as what SpaceX knows, this, and they're researching the development of more environmentally friendly fuels for rockets like methane, or even biofuels. But back to the Moon. Did you know there was actually a mineral found on the Moon that could be what gives us Earthlings' fusion reactors? If you're not a bit rusty with your knowledge of physics, here's an attempt to explain nuclear fusion. The process in which two light atomic nuclei fuse to form a heavier nucleus is called the process nuclear fusion. The process is the same one that happens in the Sun and other stars. It does much to release great amounts of energy. The mineral is helium-3, a rare isotopic form of helium, and helium-3 is exceptionally fertile. Helium-3 is very rare on Earth, as are all fusion-ready isotopes. The nuclear fusions that we can create with other elements have a catch. We don't get much of a benefit from fusing the nuclei. We pay almost as much energy as it generates. Helium-3, apparently, occurs on the Moon like sand in the sea, embedded within the upper layers of the Moon's rock. Even the raw material could be mined. For now, we still have to ask ourselves how cheaply we could send the mineral to Earth. This has given the Artemis mission the fuel it has deserved. Now, it's not just about proving that humans can survive in space or see if we can plant something on the Moon. Helium-3 may even be extracted by the scientists of the Artemis settlement, and perhaps one day such a miracle raw material will transform our whole Earth. Is the Moon mission fake or not? Have you heard that the planned missions to the Moon are fake, and that NASA has no real plans for moon landings? When NASA repeatedly delayed the launch of the Orion lunar module, such unofficial reports started to circulate. There's been problems recently with the rocket's propulsion system, the Space Launch System, which is the most powerful rocket design since the Saturn, I think. These delays have led to some speculation around them. It's not very straightforward. Though, for the lunar shuttles, NASA had quite a challenge with the SLS, but it had just missed out on building new high-performance rockets for years. The rockets send the heavy space capsules into the cosmos, and they need to be a lot more powerful than a rocket type that can shoot a satellite, like James Webb, or a space telescope into orbit. And returning humans to the Moon is a big, complex project that required new safety and size developments that the in-the-know can take time and can go wrong. It took all the challenges and suspicions, but NASA has made up for them, and successful test flights have now proven that the Orion capsule does in fact exist, and that someday humans will be riding to the Moon in it. So, in the end, overall, this is more an idea that somehow there is fake moon missions that by itself are by mistrust and rather misinformation than real facts. And what about the aliens? There's another interesting fact you may have heard of. Supposedly there are aliens on the Moon. Apollo astronauts, unofficial NASA sources, whistleblowers, are said to have confirmed that creatures reside in stations on far side of Moon, which we would call aliens. It's supposedly that they mine and do other things on the far side of the Moon, which is literally never visible from Earth. Long were the suspicions about mining on the moon complete nonsense until the discovery of helium-3 on the moon, but if there is a connection, it isn't so far-fetched. In fact, the astronauts on the last Apollo missions specifically were apparently told by the extraterrestrials to cancel the moon program and other Apollo missions, and it was said that Nixon was eager to cancel the moon program and all other Apollo missions because of that. But what does that have to do with the Artemis mission? We don't know. Could it be that NASA has a deal with the aliens, or that we are being led around by the nose so we never actually land the NASA lunar module? However, it is also incidental that Elon Musk had long ago wanted to make the first moon hotels and turned SpaceX into a postponer in this regard. Because the SpaceX Starship has not yet been made operational, the exclusive flight around the moon for well-paying moon tourists due to take place in 2023 also did not happen. If you enjoy interesting videos like this, make sure to click subscribe now.